Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Chiropractic Student Podcast. Today we are joined by Dr. Don MacDonald. You might know him from the Vitality Shift Chiropractic podcast. He also does coaching and obviously runs a practice. Thank you so much, Don, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, so you say it's quite early over there. I really appreciate you getting up this time. It's like 8 o'clock in the morning where you are. I'm chilling. It's just like in the afternoon. I've been up all day, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's funny. When I first saw open practice, I started at 10 and 11 most of the times throughout the week, because that's when I graduated in my 20s. And now that I've been in practice for 22 years, now I end up getting up at 6. My grandma always said the older you get, you're going to get up earlier, and I didn't believe her, but now I do.
That's just because you just need a wee in the middle of the night and you just can't get back to sleep. Yeah. Okay, so first of all, would you mind giving us just a little brief background, kind of how you got into chiropractic, and then from there, how you've progressed through your career?
Perfect. Yeah, I was a big into basketball. So I grew up in a really small town in the mountains in the Rockies, close to Jasper. It was called Grand Cache. And I fell in love with playing basketball, and which was nice because it kept me out of trouble because I always had to be training. So it kept me in the athletic crowd so that I didn't get into trouble. But I started experiencing some problems with my knees when I was about 14 or 15, where I started developing tendonitis, and I started taking drugs for them because that was the only option I had in our small town. We didn't even have physiotherapists. We didn't have chiropractors. I didn't really know about massage. So our options were drugs. So I was on a lot of anti-inflammatories and painkillers through high school. And then I ended up going to college to play basketball. And actually in the in-between time for my grade 12 year, I came to a big city to play higher level basketball. And I tried physiotherapy. And they'd said that my knee was stronger on the one side compared to the other, and they had to rebalance it, and that kind of made more sense to me than just that I was deficient anti-inflammatories, and that's why my knees were sore. Then it wasn't until I went to college and I was playing college basketball that I went to a chiropractor, and the first thing he did is he looked he did my cervical X-rays and said, "Look at how your head posture is," and I said, "Silly chiropractor, I didn't come because of my posture. I came because of my knees." And he said to me, "Well, what has everybody been focusing on for the last 4 years?" And I'm like, "My knees." And he goes, "How's it been going?" And I'm like, "It hasn't been going." And he says, "Okay, I'll try it your way." So I started under chiropractic care, and yeah, I had some amazing things that changed. Not only did my knees start to feel better, my posture drastically improved. I had exercise-induced asthma, and by the time the end of that first year came around, I wasn't using my inhalers anymore. My marks went up, my free throw shooting percentage went up, my focus got better, and I had such a huge change and almost a paradigm shift in health after that first year that I actually switched what I was taking to go into science to become a chiropractor.
So when you had all these other changes apart from just like your knee getting better, because I assume you went to the chiropractor just for the knee at the start
Initially, yeah.
So when you started having these other changes, did you ask the chiropractor? Did you say, "What's going on? Like, what is this you? What's happening?"
Well, he was very good at pre-framing what I might experience, because I think because we call it ABCs, anything but chiropractic. Often when a practice member or patient's under care, when all these things start improving, if you're not directing them to, like, this might be related to what we're doing, they might think it's something else, because they always think, well, I started taking vitamin C and then all of a sudden it's got better. And you're like, are you kidding? Like, I see this all the time. So he was very good at just saying, like, be aware that often we'll see these types of changes. Mm-hmm. He wasn't promising like treating conditions or curing things, but basically just talk about, as your body improves function, often you'll notice improvements in certain areas. Like, if your posture improves, your rib cage expands more, and if your rib cage expands more, you can breathe more. And when you have better proprioception, your brain can relax and you go more parasympathetic, and then you can focus better. Like, it has to make sense. And so that's why we always and I didn't know it at the time, but now when we're working with chiropractors, we always want to say that when we're doing our education with our patients or practice members, we just want to make sure that we're making sense of what happens when we improve function and what they might experience so that they can actually notice it.
Okay, so he did well, and that's kind of good. So he set up that preface for kind of all this other stuff that could happen, and now in a way you're carrying on that. You're letting your patients know exactly the same thing, basically.
Yeah, and it did help that I was like a high level basketball player. So we always say often people aren't really aware of measuring what's going on in their life, but I was like, I knew my free throw shooting
Mm.
percentage, like I knew my free throw shooting percentage from playing basketball, and I saw it go up. So like you could see that, and that's part of the stuff we do in the vitality shift too. Is we in our program we always want to make sure we measure function,
Mm.
you can see it go up. And so it's nice to actually have measurements to measure improvement. It's like being in school, right? You have marks. So as you study more, you get better marks. And so it's always nice to have some kind of rating system so you can see how things are improving.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that makes complete sense. So then, yeah, so you were deep in chiropractic, you loved it, you were still playing basketball. What happens next?
I switched into science, and so then I did my in Canada, because I'm in Canada. We had to do 3 years of science undergrad first, and then I ended up going to Palmer College of Chiropractic. That was the same school that my chiropractor had gone to, so he had recommended that, and it was in Davenport, Iowa. And so I went down to Davenport, Iowa, and went through school, had an enjoyable time down there, and then I ended up coming back to Edmonton, um, Alberta, Canada, started practice here, and so now I've been in practice for about 23 years, I think 23 years now.
Amazing. I mean, it's a real nice route into it, and people have such different ways. I like when I interview people because everyone's got such a different way into chiropractic. Like a lot of people are trauma, and then some people as family members, and like who'd have thought a knee thing? Like everyone, like a knee problem to go to a chiropractor is just something that you would never think of.
Yeah, what's
when
funny
when
is
you
that
don't know about it. Yeah.
exactly. Well, then I have chiropractors that when we're working with them and they're trying to move away from the pain model into more of like a vitalistic model or into a holistic model. They always say, "How do I link someone with a bad knee to overall function?" And I'm like, "Well, I'll tell you my story."
Yeah.
Come in with an achy knee, and then I didn't. But it's just not being aware of, the nervous system controls everything, and there's things that we can do to optimize our physiology, which then will optimize our healing. And then it just makes sense. And once it makes
Yeah.
sense, unmakes sense.
It's about creating that pathway for them to understand, because you can understand it from a chiropractor's point of view, but like you say, creating that pathway and breaking it down for them. Once you really break it down, it's like, does this make sense? And 9 times out of 10 they're going to say yes.
Which is funny because I do remember though in school. So it's funny because when my first year when I was a patient, I referred in about 20 people into his office because I just like it, like the changes that I noticed were huge, right? And so that he was saying like, you should probably be a chiropractor if you're so good at promoting it for my practice. And then I went to school, and then it was funny because suddenly once I was a chiropractor, I wasn't as good as explaining it anymore. I like kind of get into the heady part of school and writing board exams and all that kind of stuff. And it's funny because then when I got out, I felt like I was worse at being able to explain chiropractic than before I went into school.
Yeah, your head gets filled with so many different like whys as well. Like in school you learn all the different models, all the different morals and ethics behind chiropractic, the pain model, subluxation, hole in one, like everything. So, and then obviously you have speakers come to your uni who are successful in all these different parts. There's sports chiropractors who are really successful working with pain. There are vitalistic chiropractors working really well just adjusting subluxation, adjust what you find. And then there's just so many different ways, and it's like you can be successful doing anything. They all work. So then when you went into university with this one idea of what chiropractic is, you learn about all these other ideas, and it's like, wow, chiropractic is so vast, it can be whatever. It's really interesting, and it is really mind-boggling, because I remember as a student going into like philosophy classes and being like, oh my gosh, this isn't what I thought chiropractic was. And then next lecture, like every week, with different lectures, my mind was being changed and blown by all these different models of chiropractic care. It was really
Yes.
interesting.
Yes, and I think too, part of it was as well is that like when you do come out, you do feel maybe like you're not as certain because you feel like you're the one who has to perform the actual adjustments, right? And so because the chiropractic adjustment is a skill-based thing, I think that was part of another reason why I wasn't very good at it, because I felt like I was responsible for for the outcome.
Yeah.
At first, and it was easier for me to refer to somebody else than actually to promote my own self.
And so obviously you're big with the vitality shift and the change into vitalistic chiropractic care. When you came straight out of university, were you pain-based? What was going on there?
I think I came out, and again, it's funny because we end up working with, you always can mentor your younger self. So a lot of the clients that we work with are my younger self. So I came out and I dead knew that chiropractic had like way more benefits than just pain relief. And I knew that it helped to improve overall function and health. The challenge was I didn't really know how to explain it very well. I didn't know how to measure it. And all of my testing that I did, because you come out of school and again, in order to be able to pass with your note taking in a regulated health country, because if you're practicing it, obviously, like if you're in UK, you're practicing in a regulated country that is actually quite strict with what you can say, what you can advertise. You have to document everything, but everything is based on orthopedic tests. So all of my paperwork, all of my first visit was all based on pain. But then I'd suddenly try to switch to wellness care, or I'd try to switch to the benefits of long-term care. And it was just kind of like fragmented. It didn't make sense. So I was super frustrated because what I knew chiropractic was, my practice members weren't understanding it as well as I wanted them to, but I didn't really know how to bridge that gap. So I think that's the floundering part of it. And then you start to think that you're not a very good chiropractor, and then you can't communicate very well. And geez, maybe that's just the speakers on stage that are good, but I can't learn that. And so I think that was one of my biggest challenges at the beginning. And then after 5 years of practice, it's just kind of like surviving, but not really flourishing that well. That's when I brought my wife, Brandy MacDonald, into my practice, because a big part of it is business, chiropractic. We don't learn that in school, but there's a big part of the business aspect of chiropractic, along with the philosophy and along with your art. And my business acumen was not as good. Hiring staff, getting help, getting support and practice. And when I got those in line, that's when I really exploded my practice.
It's true. Yeah, we don't learn much about business. We had like a couple of lectures on it, but I think you have to kind of get a lot of that externally. So you mentioned there about like being able to make sense of stuff when you were going through, and it took you 5 years in practice and you were still trying to make sense of stuff. In terms of resources for chiropractic students, if you were to help people, if they're in a similar position where they're trying to make sense of something, what did you turn to help you along that journey?
Well, I think one of the challenges for me at the very beginning was chiropractic's always had great results with people, but they've been kind of inconsistent. So it doesn't happen like the exact same with everybody. We used to describe chiropractic as like pressure on the nerve, which would decrease nerve function, which means the end organ wouldn't function properly. And that was the way I think chiropractic made sense. Like it makes sense of the benefit of chiropractic in the past, but it's not actually really what was happening. So I think that's why a lot of people actually had a hard time explaining it, because that's not actually what was happening. And now with something called the polyvagal theory with Dr. Stephen Porges, that's a massive resource for any students that want to learn about the polyvagal theory, because it basically talks about, and I learned this also from Dr. Michael Hall. So Dr. Michael Hall is where I also got a big learning of the science and philosophy, and learning that you cannot really be mechanistic without being vitalistic, and you cannot be vitalistic without being mechanistic, because they're all in a continuum. And even if you think that you're only one or the other, it still affects both sides. So like, for example, if a vertebra is subluxated or restricted, or a joint lesion, or restricted range of motion, that still has a neurological component to it, whether you like it or not. And when the joints move properly, they inform your brain, because motion is information, about where you are in space. And it also helps to dial down that stress response so that you become more parasympathetic. And in a parasympathetic, safe, in chiropractic, we call that a state of ease. That's when all healing happens. So it's almost like a global subluxation. When your whole system is in that stress response, or even worse, if you follow the polyvagal theory, it's called dorsal collapse, where the parasympathetics have, the vagus nerve has two chains. One chain is the ventral vagus, which that's what kind of the chiropractic adjustment helps to stimulate the ventral vagus, which helps to almost just dampen down the sympathetics, because the sympathetics are always on. But if you don't have that ventral vagal working, they're firing like crazy. And then the back end of it, which is the old vagus, is called the dorsal vagus, and that actually shuts things down. So that can actually create death if someone gets that scared, or they can defecate, or it basically, you've seen people where they've actually got into low tone, like they've almost like shut her right down. And so it's just really interesting, because once you're in practice for a while and you see these different presentations of people, and then you start to dive a little bit more into the polyvagal theory, you really see that this polyvagal umbrella, chiropractic fits under it perfectly. And there's multiple disciplines under the polyvagal theory, because everything that the polyvagal theory stands for is allowing your system to get into a state of safety, or as chiropractors call it, into a state of ease. And when we're in a state of ease, that is the only state that your body will actually heal. And so that's an evolved message that I've learned even up into this last little while. One of my last podcasts I did with Dr. Stephen Porges, and from that podcast, we're actually creating a program with the Polyvagal Institute called will be the Polyvagal Informed Chiropractor. And yeah, the polyvagal language is going to be, I think, the new way that we're going to explain chiropractic.
Amazing. And so you touched upon there how we can find out a little bit more about the polyvagal sort of sphere. So you've done a podcast on the Vitality Shift already talking about this. I just listened to it, and I need to re-listen to it, because what you just said then, I was like, is that, oh my gosh, that's just gone straight over my head again. So I definitely need to re-listen to it. But how else can people find some resources on the polyvagal theory?
Well, I just listened to the audiobook, and I think it's called the Polyvagal Handbook. So if you just look it up on, I just like to listen to books mostly on Audible. When I'm driving back and forth from work, I can pound through a book pretty fast. Just with how busy our lifestyle is, I have a hard time like reading through a book, because I just don't have time to sit down to read. If you're a student, you definitely probably don't, because you're studying all the time. And this Polyvagal Handbook, I think he's just taken a couple different interviews, and then he has had them transcribed, and then they're read. His main polyvagal theory book is really, really heady. So it's really hard to read because it's very kind of, I've not read it, but I've heard people read it, and it's pretty, if you like really thick, heady stuff, that's good. But the handbook is a little bit easier. And I think he just released a new book this month, and I think it's called The Science of Safety. But if you look up on Amazon, you'll be able to find that, because it's Dr. Stephen Porges. Just look for under authors, and it'll be his new book that got released in October.
Cool. I'll put these in the show notes afterwards for anyone who's interested, as always. So apart from the polyvagal theory, is there any other bits and bobs that really helped you get a better understanding of chiropractic in general?
Yeah, and I think it was Dr. Michael Hall. I did a big program where I brought him to Edmonton, and we did like 8 different seminars in Edmonton, and then we did some interviews. Like I started interviewing him, because the funny thing is that went over all the neurology. I had chiropractors come up to me afterwards saying, I've been in practice for 20 years and I haven't learned about the neural tracts in 20 years, and this is too crazy. I need something to take home. And so I ended up doing some interviews with Dr. Michael Hall, and just so that they can listen to it over again, and it was talk about sympathetics, parasympathetics, all that kind of stuff. So that was where I got my big dive in. Also, Dr. James Chestnut, he's also quite quite good at explaining this idea of the sympathetic parasympathetic, and how chiropractic adjustments help to basically get the body into ease. And I found that it's just funny. We've really kind of dived into the polyvagal theory lately, which just ties all of those things together nicely. And so those were kind of my path. Probably as far as seminars go, we've been to the Edinburgh lectures, so that's over in UK. We've also been to the UCA conference in Birmingham.
Cool.
In UK. And then of course Chiro Europe is an amazing one that they just had one. My wife Brandy MacDonald was just speaking at it 2 days ago, virtual, of course, because we're in Canada, we can't really travel yet, but
yeah,
but there's lots of great seminar series over in the UK for sure, to be able to not travel that far too.
Yeah, there's a few coming up. Like we have the UCA conference coming up in from the time we're recording this in about a month's time. So this should come out just before it. It's really good. The UCA, we have Chiro Essentials, so we have a lot of big people coming and talking, and it's a big gathering of quite vitalistic chiropractors, the UCA.
Yes.
It's awesome, and I only annoyingly I've only ever been to a virtual one, so this is the first one I'm going to go to in person, which is
You'll love it.
It'll be fun. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
It's awesome. I just got 2 more resources too that would be really good.
Go for it.
One would be to follow my wife. So Brandy MacDonald on Facebook, she posts every day. And so she's like kind of the queen of education. She's been kind of the running my office. So she's trained all of our staff. She's traveled the world. She spoke at about 14 different countries around the world. And she's just amazing at communicating chiropractic. And so that's total free resource that you can, as a student. Mm-hmm. And then she also wrote a book called Sipping Brandy. And Sipping Brandy is actually a culmination of her previous posts. She's been doing these daily Facebook posts for about, like, I don't know, probably close to 10 years. And so it's just like it's almost like you just go through and it just gives you tidbits to think about, all in this same mindset of chiropractic and how to explain it. And then probably the last thing is I wrote my book, The Underdog Curse, which is kind of a mindset book that that's super helpful for a lot of chiropractors. It's also available on Amazon.
Awesome. And obviously you've started you've got the Vitality Shift and the Breaking the Underdog Curse podcasts. They've been going for so long now. Probably one of the longest running chiropractic podcasts. Why did you start it? What was your why for that podcast?
Well, what actually is pretty funny is that I first wrote the book, The Underdog Curse, and then I wanted to start to promote that, because I'd been coaching for about 10 years, and then I just always wanted to write a book. And it kind of was I was at a Tony Robbins event, and he basically was saying, what's one thing that you've been putting off forever that you've just not closed the loop on, that's just wasting energy in your brain because you've been wanting to do it, you haven't done it? And it was writing a book. And so I wrote this book. And then I was like learning how to promote books, and how you promote books is by creating a platform. And so I initially was writing this book just to help everybody, like just generally everybody. I hadn't really picked a market, and I was dealing with the general population. And the more I got into dealing with the general public, the more I realized how I love working with chiropractors more. So I kind of went to bring my attention back in and focus again and say, no, I really want to work with chiropractors. So I actually started the Breaking the Underdog Curse to match up with my book, The Underdog Curse. And then after we'd done that for a while, we kind of, me and my wife had really realized that what we're doing in our office, as far as like communication, linking chiropractic to values, doing objective testing and reevaluations to helping with care planning and all stuff for chiropractors, that we just decided to create the Vitality Shift. And so then we kind of continued the podcast on and changed it as the Vitality Shift. But it was funny is that I was like, I would like to get my voice out there, because I was spending all this time trying to get on other people's podcasts, and they weren't even in chiropractic. And I'm like, why don't I just do a podcast? And so
it must have been one of the first chiropractic podcasts, right?
No, I think there was definitely a few chiropractic podcasts before mine, but it's funny, you know how you say like mentors, like before the call, you said it's kind of weird to talk to mentors where you kind of on a pedestal and all that kind of stuff. I had a coach who's a Tony Robbins coach said to me, "You have a radio voice. You should really you should really do a podcast." And it's funny, it's just one person says that to you, and then you're like, well, maybe I should. And then I'm sure glad I did, because thing that I probably wouldn't have thought about until, somebody just comes down and they have a little bigger vision for you than you have for yourself, and then it just kind of pushes you a little bit over the edge.
Yeah, I mean, it's perfect, and like it's helped me so much through chiropractic school. Like I was listening to them for probably from like year 2, and I've only just literally finished this month. So and that's like why I was starting my own thing. I think in the UK we struggle to have something that's specifically for students. I hate the sound of my own voice, but I thought, screw it, I'll just do it anyway. But yeah, with you, like, because I was listening to you pretty much every day throughout the whole of school, and it's like now to have you on the podcast, it's kind of like you say, you put your mentors on a pedestal, and I'm just now sat here in awe listening to everything you're saying, like writing notes down, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So yeah, thank you so much. If you had one bit of advice, any student, and this could be a bit of general advice to one student, like come up to you, I'm in year 1, 2 or something like that, and I said, what would you tell me to do? The first thing to do right now, what would be the first thing you would tell me to do?
I think I would try to meet as many chiropractors as possible, and find out the ones that you would like to either to emulate, because when you first come out of school, this is the process of kind of being kind of a master in chiropractic, is first you find out people that are successful and doing something that aligns with you, that you think that looks like that would be really cool to do, and then you learn from them or hang around them. So we always say we'll become like the people we hang around with, the top 6 people we hang around with. So really important to hang around with the people that are where you want to be. I always learned this in basketball. I always get better when I played against guys that were better than me, because I always helped me raise the bar. Now, this is why I wrote the book, The Underdog Curse. You don't want to stay there, because then you're always just emulating everybody else. But we need that at first. And it's just kind of like when you're in school and you take a technique class, you need to copy exactly like what the instructor's saying. And you have to be very mechanistic as far as learning how to adjust, how to thrust, how to palpate. But then you start like integrating different things together, and then you want to start to create your own. So I think throughout the beginnings, you're gonna emulate people, but don't try to copy people. Like, don't try to be exactly like, we would tease the word minion. You don't want to be a minion where you're just like reverberating everything someone else has said. Like, you need the mentorship, but then you want to take that mentorship and you want to integrate it into your physiology, and you want to make it your own. I always try to tell all students, I said, every chiropractic technique was developed because that person, whether it was Thompson or Gonstead or anybody, they learned all the other techniques, and then they integrated it into their own self, and then they made it their own expression. And so your goal as a chiropractor is to create the Dr. Lewis technique or the Dr. technique down the road, because it's going to be your own special technique. And that's why I always laugh when people say, well, what technique do you do? And I go, it's a Dr. Don technique. And it's a culmination of all things I've learned in my whole life, plus it applied, right? So once you've applied it and you start actually adjusting practice members, and then observing and measuring the feedback, then you tweak, then you adjust, then you tweak, then you adjust. And that's how you basically develop a master. So, but it all starts with, you do definitely want to jump the learning curve and hang around with the people that are the successful people, or the people that are something that you would love to do. So it's like, if you're excited to have a life similar to them, so you start, but then you develop your own after.
Yeah, someone who just like has that similar vibration as what you're wanting to do, I guess. They're kind of cool. I mean, that's really easy and makes sense to do as a student. Like, loads of people want chiropractic students to come and observe. More than happy to give like help and feedback and advice to students when you message them. And some really amazing resources there. Like, we've really compacted so much information there for people to go and explore into the polyvagal, obviously Brandy's stuff going on, your podcasts, all the conferences and lectures and things to go to. If people want to get in contact with you and just maybe have a little chat or find out a little bit more about you, how can they do so?
Probably the best way would be through Facebook. They can go through Facebook. I'm just Don MacDonald on Facebook. The other thing is if they go to our website, thevitalityshift.com, we have some free resources on there too. So we actually have creating the salutogenic practice. So we didn't talk about salutogenesis, but salutogenesis is basically on the spectrum on the other side of pathogenesis. So pathogenesis is treating disease condition. Salutogenesis is all about like growing health or maximizing health. And so we actually have a free little mini program that you can get on the Vitality Shift. You just go to the Vitality Shift and you'll just have to scroll through it and you can sign up. And then it's a little, I think it's a 3-part series that we did where some resources on that as well.
We love free as students, I tell you that.
I know, I know. I remember the student stuff too. I was like, bring it on, baby.
Yeah, so that's really cool. Everyone can just go on your website, just start getting on with that straight away. Amazing. I mean, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto the show. It's been an absolute pleasure, and one of my goals to actually have a chat with you. So I really appreciate it.
That's good. And I want to thank you too, because, we call our brand of chiropractic really needs leaders to stand up and at all different segments, like right from students on. And I think the earlier that a chiropractic student can get a vision of what chiropractic could possibly be, the better it is for the whole profession. So I'm glad you're helping chiropractic students learn this, because a lot of schools, and this is all around the world, not just the UK, is kind of focusing on kind of the physical physiotherapy mechanistic aspects of chiropractic, which is fine, but they're not even getting a chance to get a glimpse of what the possibilities of chiropractic is, which are far, far beyond just the pain relief part. And it's more about life expression, and it changes people's lives and it changes people's relationships and their communication and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't happen unless someone plants the seed. So thank you for doing this to help plant the seeds in the students that are going through school in the UK.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone else for listening in, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you again, Don.